The New York Jets went in search of a new identity this offseason as they attempt to make the playoffs for the first time since 2010. I had the chance to catch up with Paul Esden, a radio sports talk show host for WNYO 88.9 in New York, to get his perspective on what the Jets were able to accomplish this offseason. Obviously, Paul, the big story this offseason was the return of Darrelle Revis and Antonio Cromartie this offseason to the Jets. So can you just tell me what their return mean for the Jets? And I know that making a big splash in free agency was important to owner Woody Johnson.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we can only go off paper right now. And the New York Jets, also with the addition of Buster Screen, I think they've turned possibly the worst secondary into the best secondary. So the return has been fantastic, especially out here in New York. The Jets are stationed in New Jersey, but the fanfare here has been, we've been very excited to have Darrelle Revis return. It's almost LeBron James-esque with him coming back. He's still the best corner in the game. I mean, GM John Idzik last year had the chance to bring back Revis, and he kind of dropped the ball, and that was one of many mistakes he made last year. And I just think that was one of the reasons that he ended up leaving, was because they didn't bring they didn't bring Revis back. So in the court of public opinion, say that the Jets are very excited to bring back Revis and are feeling pretty good about the Todd Bowles Maccagnan regime starting.
And tell me, I know that Mike Maccagnan and Todd Bowles were part of the offseason makeover, and I know that Charley Casserly played a big role in them coming to the Big Apple. So can you tell me, what have you learned about Maccagnan and Bowles the short time they've been there?
It's been a journey ever since the perjury we had earlier in the year with getting rid of Rex Ryan and John Idzik. We were looking for a fresh start. I think that's exactly what we got. Todd Bowles brings this subtle, quiet leadership. You saw it from the very first press conference. And Maccagnan is a calculating, he's a pro player guy, unlike Idzik. He came in, the director of college scouting, he worked his way up. He's a player guy, and he's been aggressive, very aggressive with the Brandon Marshall trade, obviously bringing Revis back, and they've been doling out the cash. So it's just been, I think they've really, the Jets fans have been very accepting, obviously, because we haven't been to the playoffs since 2010. So, I mean, we're very open to try to make things happen.
And tell me, I know that the Jets have been on a roller coaster ride recently with Geno Smith. I know that he threw for just over 2,500 yards a year ago, and he kind of had a subpar season with only 13 touchdowns and 13 interceptions. So where do the Jets stand at quarterback? And certainly with the number 6 pick and all the picks they have in the draft, they have the ammunition to get a player like Marcus Mariota. So where would you handicap the Jets' strength, or where they stand at the quarterback position?
Well, as you mentioned about Geno Smith, he certainly had his fair of growing pains as a second-year quarterback. Really, at this point, bringing in Fitzpatrick on the late conditional round pick trade with the Houston Texans, the quarterback position is a little bit in disarray at this point. We only have Matt Sims, which is the practice squad, he's gotten a little playing time within the last several years, but he's nothing to yell about or anything. Geno Smith has been inconsistent, really. He's shown flashes. The last game last season, he had a perfect quarterback rating, 370-plus yards passing. He looked phenomenal. But ultimately, that's the epitome of his 2-year career. It's consistency. And the rumors have been going around with the Marcus Mariota possibilities. Rich Cimini for ESPN, New York Jets reporter, he reported that the Jets have the inside track to the number 2 pick. And for some reason, I have this gut feeling that somehow it's possible that the Jets could launch all the way to the number 1 pick and possibly land Jameis Winston. He's my favorite quarterback, and that would be ridiculous. The ammunition is what's concerning. They only have 6 picks this year, which is nothing too large. Because you see Cleveland with 12 and 19 in the first round, they certainly have the ammunition to launch up into that top 5 category that we're talking about here. And the Jets only having 6 picks and the 6th overall pick, I don't think either quarterback falls to 6. If they want one of them, they're going to have to trade up. They haven't had the franchise quarterback since probably Namath, and you could argue Ken O'Brien in the 80s, but it's what for me is if they draft one of the top 2 guys, if they launch up and draft one of them, it's the resisting the urge to play him. I think whichever guy, maybe Winston you can play immediately, but Mariota I think needs a year or 2 to develop.
And certainly, new GM Mike Maccagnan has been very aggressive this free agency period, as we mentioned. He re-signed Revis, he brought back Antonio Cromartie, and they re-upped David Harris. So how important do you think it was for the Jets to make an aggressive stance in free agency and making a statement that they're trying to win again after 5 or 6 years out of the playoffs?
I think it was very important. Thank you for bringing that up. It was important to be aggressive because the last regime wasn't aggressive, and the FireJohnIntic.com, the banners, and all the things, Jet fans weren't feeling too good last year and the last several years, ever since the AFC Championship 2-year run with Rex Ryan in his first 2 years. So I think it was very important to be aggressive and show Jet fans that they're serious about competing again. I mean, bringing Brandon Marshall, he's a top 7 receiver. Revis, Cromartie, Screen, we briefly talked about it earlier. Revitalizing the secondary, making this a competitive team. The AFC East, Patriots have won 12 of the last 13 division titles. I mean, and the Jets are showing that they're not going to lie down and take it anymore.
And tell me, I know that Brandon Marshall brings a certain dynamic and new element that the Jets passing game hasn't had in a while. So tell me about the importance of just bringing a new dynamic to their offensive system, and how do you think it'll fit in New York? And do you think that it was a steal to get him for a 5th-round pick?
Oh, absolutely. If you would have asked me what the New York Jets' number 1 need was heading into free agency, heading into the offseason, rather, besides the obvious question mark at quarterback, I would say number 1, a legitimate number 1 receiver. I mean, people questioned it with the Eric Decker signing, and he tried to, and he didn't get 1,000 yards. He had a nice season, but a nice season, a more of a number 2 option. So bringing in Brandon Marshall for, as you said, a 5th-round pick, I mean, it was the biggest steal I could have said. My father's a Cowboys fan, and when he heard that we got him for a 5th-round pick, he said he would offer them a 4th or 3rd-round pick for him. So, again, a top 7 receiver, you can't teach the intangibles, the 6'4" body, his production, obviously, 7 out of the 8 last years, he's had over 1,000 yards, the 3 straight 100-plus catches earlier in his career. I mean, this guy's a legitimate weapon, and he changes the New York Jets offense considerably. I mean, he's a red zone target. He's their new number 1 weapon. He is possible. They probably have the best receiving core in the AFC East with this addition. And like I said, I think that this completely changes the dynamic of the New York Jets offense. I mean, this really increases their chances of competing in the AFC East this year.
So, can you tell me, Paul, what are some possible draft options for the Jets with the 6th pick? And I know they have a total of 6 picks. So what should we be looking for the Jets to do in the draft this season?
Absolutely. So the possibility of trading up is definitely a factor. Winston, Mariota, there have been those possibilities, rumors kicking around. It's 2 weeks before the draft, so you get those kind of rumors a lot. But I think that Winston could be a possibility if the Jets go to #1. It's going to cost a lot. It's going to cost the 6th pick this year, the 1st round next year, and maybe more. So it'd be a huge.
Would you do it?
Sure.
Would you do it?
Would I do it? I would. I would do it. I'd pull the trigger. Not a lot of Jet fans are going to agree with me here. I think quarterback. You need to have a quarterback. It's been proven. We haven't had a guy make the Super Bowl like a Trent Dilfer in a long time. We have Brad Johnson, Trent Dilfer. That was over a decade ago, and we haven't really seen it since. So for me, you need a quarterback, and I feel like Jameis Winston's the real deal. He has off-the-field concerns, obviously, and that's something that if the Jets brass feels good enough about it, if they feel good about it, make the move, give them what they want, and go get your quarterback. Because if they don't, Phillip Rivers and Drew Brees are potentially on the block. I don't believe Drew Brees is, but Phillip Rivers certainly is. And the reports are by Adam Schefter that it's going to cost 2 first-round picks. So, I mean, you have to make a move here at the quarterback position. And, again, I'll address, if they stay at 6, some of these other positions they could address. I said a pass rusher, I believe, is the last missing piece from making this defense elite. Names to keep an eye on would be Vic Beasley, my favorite pass rusher out of the crew. Randy Gregory, but he had the marijuana concerns. Shane Ray, but I'm a little down on Shane Ray recently. His combine performance, I'm just not sold. Dante Fowler, I believe, is going to go 3rd overall to Jacksonville, but if he is there, he's a strong possibility. Again, we talked about the quarterbacks. Maybe in the 2nd or 3rd round, you look at a name Brett Hundley or Bryce Petty. I didn't say that the first time around, but those are quarterbacks I'd keep an eye on in the 2nd-tier level. And wide receiver, Kevin White or Amari Cooper. That is possible. With all the veteran free agent acquisitions, a best player available, I like Kevin White or Amari Cooper, whoever Oakland doesn't take there. Offensive line, I mean, the Jets need some guards. I mean, they brought in James Carpenter in free agency, but really I could see Brandon Sheriff if the Jets decide, instead of trading up, maybe trading back and getting a Brandon Sheriff or a Leo Collins who's rising up draft boards. And that's something. And again, with running back, one of my favorite things is if one of the top 2 guys falls in the 2nd round, Todd Gurley or Melvin Gordon, the Jets should jump on that in the 2nd round and bring in him, even with the addition of Stephen Ridley. Maybe even Duke Johnson, but I'm obviously higher on Melvin Gordon or Todd Gurley pulling the trigger there with the 2nd round pick.
And tell me, what most intrigued you about the tandem or marriage between Todd Bowles and Mike Maccagnan?
Sure. For Todd Bowles, first off, I think his defensive track record is exciting. I think that's what really gets my gears going. What he could do on defense, what he did with the Arizona Cardinals last year, the secondary, with this new secondary, I think that's definitely going to be something to watch. It's going to be great to have Revis back, Cromartie, Screen, the whole family reunion thing, Screen being the new addition, and seeing what he could do last year. I mean, the Cardinals won with a combination of Carson Palmer, Drew Stanton, Logan Thomas, and Ryan Lilly. Need I say more there? So it's going to be, and he was the defensive coordinator, understand? And I just think that the Jets, I mean, this is a whole different animal with Muhammad Wilkerson still there, getting this new fresh perspective and Maccagnan being the player guy. I really think that's what intrigues me about this new dynamic for the New York Jets.
And tell me, what do you think is the X factor for the Jets? And do you think they'll have enough to contend for that playoff spot? Something that they haven't achieved since 2010.
Just as you said, we haven't been in the playoffs since 2010, the second of 2 AFC championship runs. And the Jets fan, the New York media especially, it's either playoff, there's no moral victories. You've got to make the playoffs. And that's why Woody Johnson ultimately had to make that move. This might be bold, but it hasn't stopped me before. Even with the current quarterback situation, I see this AFC East going down to the final 2 weeks of the season. I think any one of these teams could make a case to win it. In terms of order, I mean, Patriots are at the top with Tom Brady right now. You have Buffalo rising quickly with all the additions they've made with the Rex Ryan and the Jets. And then I see a little bit of a gap, and then there's the Dolphins. Their receiving core is questionable. Lamar Miller, I'm not sure if he's the number one guy. Can he be? So for the Dolphins, I don't really know what they have there. So I think the disparity between 1 and 4 is really small. So again, I feel like it's going to come down to the final 2 weeks. Like I said, the Patriots have only lost people. Vince Wilfork, Darrelle Revis, Browner. They still have Brady, so you got to keep them at number 1 at least before the season starts. Realistically, for the Jets, I see them winning in between 9 and 11 games this year if they could get a legitimate quarterback. I think that's their ceiling. I think they can do it. The defense will keep the Jets in every game this season. And the X factor for the Jets in 2015, I think overall as an X factor, will be to limit turnovers in general, from the quarterback position especially, and forcing turnovers on defense. Only having 2 interceptions from the cornerbacks last season is abysmal. I mean, they didn't put Geno Smith in good positions to give him, short fields to work with, and the offense wasn't very good anyway. So the Jets defense has to force more turnovers and put the offense in good positions. And if Geno Smith or Fitzpatrick can play turnover-free football, a huge if, the sky's the limit for this football team.
And tell me, do you think the factor that the Jets didn't spend any money last year in free agency and they really weren't active under John Izek, do you think that's led to Rex Ryan's demise in New York, that marriage? And do you think if they took a more aggressive approach, Rex Ryan would still be the coach in New York?
I think that's a great question. If they would have been more aggressive, I think he was put in a position to fail, obviously, with holding money and Idzik being the cap guy. He didn't put Rex Ryan in a position, especially that secondary. We were pulling guys off the street on Tuesday and then playing them on Sunday, and we were getting torched, especially when we had that small track during the season where we played like Rivers, Manning, Brady, and all these Rivers, all these quarterbacks in a row. It was death row. It was tough for the Jets to compete. But also, I'm a Rex Ryan guy. I love the guy. He brought passion in his fan base that we hadn't seen in a long time. But unfortunately, ultimately, the thing that killed Rex Ryan was his inability to develop quarterbacks. I mean, he had Mark Sanchez his first year, and he wasn't able to bring in the correct offensive guy to get the most out of Mark Sanchez and limit his turnovers. So that falls on him. You bring in Geno Smith, and then again, you don't bring in the right offensive guy. We have a different offensive coordinator every year. We had Marty Morningweg last year, the year before that, then we have Sperano, and then Brian Schottenheimer. I mean, we have all these guys. It's so inconsistent. I don't know what quarterback could have succeeded in this system. So I think, ultimately, his ability not to develop an offense, and especially develop a quarterback, is the main reason why he's not the coach right now. But also, I agree with your point there. Not being aggressive enough in free agency last year certainly played a factor. But if you look at the cornerbacks this year that were available in free agency, and the cornerbacks last year that were available in free agency, on one side this year you had Revis, you had Cromartie, you had Browner. I feel like the cornerback depth was a lot deeper this year, as opposed to last year. You had guys like Alteron Werner, who was more of a zone guy, so he didn't really fit the system. Dominic Rogers, Cromartie. People were overpaying for corners last year, and the Jets were almost in a position where they had to, and then Idzik decided not to. But that was certainly a dagger in the coffin.
Well, Paul, we thank you for joining us this afternoon on the Two-Man Advantage podcast, and we certainly thank you for your time and wish you a lot of fun covering New York Jets football this season.
Oh, thanks a lot, man. And thanks for having me on. I'd love to do this again. Two-Man Advantage podcast. Yeah, fantastic job. Thanks, man. Thanks, Kevin.